and such liberties of which all manner of men of equal stature and so on, that their voice be heard throughout history and in tales, for in Dutch we are not of Helen, it's true. Oh! Hey guys, didn't see y'all there. I'm Celtic Templar, and welcome back to the Order, and yes, for this, video on July, or Independence Month, we are actually going to be talking about none other than Phillis Wheatley. She is kind of what you might call a forgotten hero or forgotten story in the American Revolution. And in such, her tale is what you might call a forgotten one. One major reason why is because of the saddened tale of her type of falling. She was actually probably, though, one of the most famous black women in history for one major reason, and you will understand why. Now, when she was born on May 8th, 1753 in West Africa. However, at somewhere around the age, I want to say 7 to 8 years old, she was actually supposed to be enslaved at that time. However, it's stated that in doing so, she was then enslaved to the Wheatley family in Boston. It's stated that the Wheatleys, however, taught her how to read and write, especially Mary Wheatley, who was one of the daughters of, well, the Wheatley family. It's stated, though, that the Wheatleys actually encouraged her to actually write poems and books, especially after seeing of how well she incredibly learned to read and write. And in such, when it came to doing this, she actually later on went to England in 1773, especially into London, with her master's son. The Wheatleys, well, it's actually stated that Wheatley later met, actually, many prominent people who actually later became patrons to her famous type of, well, scriptures. In fact, it's actually stated that upon this, she had actually written many poems and journals and as well books that are which related to many subjects as well as many parts of religion anyways, and as well morals. And as which this actually was then brought her fame and fortune throughout many parts of England and her colonies, such as that of the Americas and pretty much other places. Now, it's actually stated that many famous figures, such as one infamous would be George Washington, actually would even credit her for her work. And in fact, you gotta admit that it's actually kind of impressive. However, it would even be stated that none other than another famous poet, even, by the name of Jupiter Haroun, would later on praise her by his own work and his own poems, which that's actually saying something. And if now you understand, it's actually stated that Phillis Wheatley was actually one of America's first black poets, and as well one of the most famous ones at that. It's actually stated that none other than Thomas Jefferson himself would actually take inspiration from Miss Wheatley, and as such even asked her on her own ideas on the idealism of liberty. She had later sent him back a message in a type of incredible penmanship that stated that in such, liberty is which given to us has much be given of any God-given right to any man, woman, or child who is born in this earth, for God has given to us this liberty. In fact, she had even been asked by none other than Thomas Jefferson to write a summit to actually decorating the idealism of ending slavery. This, though, was way back then, before the end of the American Revolution. And such, she herself actually told Thomas Jefferson himself in a letter on how can she actually state on the ending of slavery. And in fact, the ending of slavery will probably be the end of, well, many forms in history as our own subject. For in such, you can never truly end slavery, but you can only truly destroy it in many forms. This is what she actually really meant by it. She is stated to have actually had a massive paper long, that actually spoke the idealism of ending slavery in many forms, all the way from Moses to the present day at that time. It's actually stated that it was stated to have been written in such fine penmanship that even later on, in many 10 years after her death, that the paper was still being, well, read out loud. And as well, even in the South, there were many penmanships that were actually quoting her on the idealism that there should be an ending of slavery. In fact, many slaves were stated to have actually read this paper especially, and during the American Revolution it's actually stated that this paper would actually influence many blacks to actually fight for the colonial forces rather than the British forces. That's if they could read and write. But it's actually stated that many slaves would actually fight either for the United States or the British, but that's a different subject for a time. However, I want to put this out here, y'all. This type of time in history does go very badly soon after. In fact, it's actually stated that soon after publication of her work, and in fact of her first book, it's actually stated that Phillis Wheatley was later freed by her masters, who died shortly a year after in 1774, in that spring of that year. Now, in such, she then actually married John Peters, but became in debt with John because it's actually stated that John had actually become what you might call a loner and such, who of which actually took on massive loans in order to help himself. John was later imprisoned time after time because of his debts. And in such, because of this, it's stated that this would actually later cause Phillis Wheatley to actually then work with no end. And in such, she would work from daybreak till, the day when morning ends. In other words, this was actually one of her most famous poems that actually stated that of which the hard-working woman would work and such, and she would pretty much press her hands against the hard-working steel and labor until her own love would return to her. Meaning, this is a story and poem about herself, of which was actually placed in one of Benjamin Franklin's famous newsletters, or in fact one of his famous papers, in which the Pennsylvania Gazette that spoke about her. It would even be stated that in such famous forms she became a maid, and of which she was not used to such. And even writing many of her books and poems, selling them for little as which she could. However, many of her patrons and as well her patrons in England couldn't help her because of the American Revolution was happening. And in fact, this would actually cause her to go into massive debt. And in fact, she had stated to have actually had up to 3 children, 2 of which died in the previous term because of the massive debt. It was stated that pretty much she would actually, would die in debt in major forms because of her husband. In fact, it's actually stated that she would later die on the age of 31 in December 5th of 1784. And her last-born son, infant child, died soon after. This is probably one of the most saddening parts of the American Revolution, and as well one of the most saddening parts in history. But however, she was known far and wide throughout the Americas as an intelligent woman who knew how to read and write, and as well, much more over than that, knew how to do something that which was prior beyond anyone's knowledge. In fact, she actually wrote such beautiful works in craftsmanship that of which, even in history, even into this day, there are some statues that of which have been placed about her. However, it has been stated that Black Lives Matter has accidentally destroyed, if you ask me though, they kind of destroyed them for no reason, just because they were racist. You see which is kind of the saddening part to it, which I do not want to show any of the imagery of the statue being destroyed, so yeah. However, it is stated though that many forms of her work actually incredibly last to this day, and of which are vacuum sealed to this point. Now, I want to put this out here, y'all. She had worked tirelessly throughout her life as a maid, or even worse than a maid, in order to keep herself sustained and as well keep her last surviving child alive. But because of the fact her own husband was imprisoned, it stated that this would actually later cause her own son to die at the age of infancy, and such, die due to starvation. To this day, we don't know how badly her life has been, but we can understand on how bad this was for her. She herself had to survive at any means necessary. That meant working to the brim in order to survive. Now, I will leave a link down below, especially 2 links down below, from Phillis Wheatley during the time when she was supposedly a slave. And it's such muse of beauty that of which spoke about her. In fact, the first time I ever heard of her was actually on the show Liberty's Kids. And in such, she is probably one of my Well, I would want to say one of my favorite African American heroes. However, one of my favorites would actually have to be none other than, well, the infamous man who helped us defeat the British at the Battle of Yorktown. So, if none of y'all have seen that, I will leave a link down below if any of y'all want to see it, of none other than James Lafayette, or James Armistead Lafayette, if any of y'all want to understand him a little more. But anyways, guys, this has been Templar. Hopefully you found this helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you want me to talk about any American hero in history, especially during the American Revolution, or as well any American person in history, especially during the American Revolution. We will be talking about more African American heroes in history and as well more subjects during this time of the month of July, and as such, we will hopefully get y'all to see more. Anyways, guys, like and subscribe to help the channel grow, and as well, most of y'all that do watch this aren't yet subscribed, so please click that bell button and more notifications, and as well, also subscribe. In fact, if any of y'all actually like mostly any part of history, this is your subject to matter. In fact, we cover everything from history, so hopefully y'all like this. Anyways, guys, this has been Templar. Have a great day.